प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं तं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Gurubhyo Namaha. We continue with chapter 4, Gnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, of renunciation, of action. Here is the essence of the verse number 1, translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. Imam vivasvate yogam proktavan aham avyayam vivasvan manave praha manu ikshvakave abravit. Here is the English translation. Shri Bhagavan said, I proclaimed this imperishable yoga to Vivasvat. Vivasvat declared it to Manu, and Manu told it to Ikshvaku. Again, Bhagavan said, I proclaimed this imperishable yoga to Vivasvat. Vivasvat declared it to Manu, and Manu told it to Ikshvaku. Here, when Bhagavan says this imperishable yoga, he includes what is taught in the previous chapters, the Sankhya Yoga and the Karma Yoga. Bhagavan speaks of them as being one, although they have been declared to be different. They have the same basis and yield the same results. Here, the basis for these two yogas, the Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga, is be without the three gunas. And this brings fulfillment both to the wisdom of Sankhya and to the practice of Karma Yoga. And now we have the Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga in chapter 4. So all of this yoga expounded by Bhagavan Krishna is imperishable because it brings to light the wisdom of the Absolute and the wisdom of the Relative. Both the Relative and Absolute are eternal, and so is also yoga. So yoga is also eternal, and this yoga which expounds the truth of both, the truth of life in its fullness, is also eternal. And why is it eternal? Because it serves the cosmic purpose and is natural to the mind of man. The Bhagavad Gita is the highest expression of divine intelligence, understandable by man. Dealing with the unseen aspects of life, it also touches on the past and present of the world of our daily life. Again, it is the highest expression dealing with the unseen aspects of life, and it touches on the past and present of the world of our daily life. Furthermore, Bhagavad Gita, while expounding universal truth, is itself a historical record and relates incidents that took place 5,000 years ago. Bhagavan says that he taught this eternal yoga to Vivasvat, that is the sun god, in the beginning of creation, in order to infuse strength into the Kshatriyas and to enable them to maintain law and order and preserve the path of righteousness for the well-being of society. It is interesting here to note that the ancient wisdom was given to the Kshatriyas, who are the warriors, and it was given to them in order to enable them to maintain law and order and preserve the path of righteousness for the well-being of the whole society. Vivasvat then revealed it to his son Manu, and the Manu referred here is the seventh Manu, and he is called Vaivasvat Manu. He is said to be the progenitor of the present human race and also the lawgiver to the world. Then Manu gave it to his son Ikshvaku, who ruled at Ayodhya as the first king of the solar dynasty. Now, in order to understand the historical significance of the Bhagavad Gita, one must be familiar with the Indian conception of history and time. The history and the study of this history has a definite purpose and place in the life of the individual. It aims to educate the mind of the present with information from the past in order to ensure a better present and a better future. In this way, each generation takes advantage of the achievements of the past and then advances towards greater wisdom in life. Normally, if you look at the modern history, they are written in a chronological sequence. here we are presented with the history of millions of years, and it is not physically possible to write the history of millions of years in a chronological sequence. In the case of small countries with just a few thousand years of civilization, it is quite practicable for historians with a vision of that small area and that small span of time to maintain a chronological order. But Vyasa had a clear vision of the whole span of time beginning from the day of creation, and such a mind would not and could not assign any value to chronology. The sage of enlightened vision, Vedavyasa, had before him a vast span of time to take into account, and as a conscientious and fully integrated man, he could not write the history of this immeasurable period as a sequence of days and years. He could only select particular happenings and record them in such a way as to inspire and guide people of all times on the path of evolution. So, it is not the knowledge of the chronological order of events that educates students of history, but it is the value of events that is important. And this is the aspect of history on which Indian historians have concentrated. And so, the great historians, and especially the sage of enlightened vision, Vedavyasa, put on record for all generations to read only such instances in the great span of time that will help integrate men's lives, and the purpose was to inspire men both as individuals and as members of society. Besides, Vyasa thought it absurd to pin every event down chronologically just for the sake of establishing each link on the long road of time. And this is why no chronological order is to be found in the Indian histories. Now let us try to understand the Indian conception of time. Time is a conception to measure eternity. Indian historians base their conception of time on eternal being. For them, eternity is the basic field of time. Again, Indian historians base the conception of time on eternal being, and for them, eternity is the basic field of time. When you understand this concept of time, then you can clearly see what confronted Vyasa and other writers of Indian history. To arrive at some conception of the eternal, the best measure will be the lifespan of something that has the greatest longevity in the relative field of creation. So again, the best measure will be the lifespan of something that has the greatest longevity in the relative field of creation. And this, according to the enlightened vision of Vyasa, is the Divine Mother, the Universal Mother, who is ultimately responsible for all that is, responsible for all that was, and is responsible that all will be in the entire cosmos. So this Divine Mother has the greatest longevity in the relative field of creation and is ultimately responsible for all that is, all that was, and all that will be in the entire cosmos. Now, the eternity of the eternal life of absolute being is conceived in terms of innumerable lives of Divine Mother. A single lifespan of Divine Mother encompasses 1,000 lifespans of Lord Shiva. Again, a single lifespan of Divine Mother encompasses 1,000 lifespans of Lord Shiva. And one life of Lord Shiva covers the time of 1,000 lifespans of Lord Vishnu. And one life of Lord Vishnu equals the duration of 1,000 lifespans of Brahma, the Creator. Now, a single lifespan of Brahma is conceived in terms of 100 years of Brahma. Again, a single lifespan of Brahma is conceived in terms of 100 years of Brahma. And now each year of Brahma comprises 12 months of Brahma, and each month comprises 30 days of Brahma. And one day of Brahma is called a Kalpa. So this one day, which is called Kalpa, is equal to the time of 14 Manus. The time of one Manu is called a Manvantara. One Manvantara equals 71 Chaturyugis. And one Chaturyugi comprises the total span of 4 yugas. And these yugas are Satyuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. Now the span of the yugas is conceived in terms of the duration of Satyuga. So again, the span of the yugas is conceived in terms of the duration of Satyuga. So thus, the span of Treta Yuga is equal to 3/4 of that of Satyuga. And the span of Dwapara Yuga is half that of Satyuga. And then the span of Kali Yuga is 1/4 that of Satyuga. Now, the span of Kali Yuga equals 432,000 years of man's life. Now, consider the time of creation, for how many billion, trillion years the world has been. Even if the account of 1 year were to occupy a page or even a single line, how could anyone possibly read such a history and apply its lesson to his life? And this is why chronological order was not maintained by Indian historians. Apart from being impracticable, it was considered to be unnecessary, useless, and damaging to the very purpose of history. All this should be borne in mind and taken into account by those modern historians who tend to reject as non-history any series of events for which they fail to find a proper chronological order. Moreover, it is deplorable that such precious accounts of life on the highest human level as are to be found in the historical material of ancient India should have been regarded as myth. On the contrary, they should be recognized as a most useful history of the highest civilization that has ever existed on earth. Bhagavan says, Bhagavad Gita forms the central core of the most authentic record of Indian history, the Mahabharata. And this Mahabharata cannot be dismissed as mythology just because the narrow vision of modern historians, tied to rigid chronology, fails to understand it as a historical record and puts it in the compartment of imaginative literature. It is highly regrettable that some modern commentators on the Bhagavad Gita have followed in the footsteps of modern historians and refused to admit its historic authenticity. It is to be hoped that the light will dawn and truth will be recognized as truth. So, when Bhagavan recalls for Arjuna that the great wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita was given to Vivasvat in the beginning of this Kalpa, he does not enumerate in detail all the custodians of the supreme knowledge. To satisfy Arjuna about the original source of the teaching, it is sufficient to give him the idea of this eternal wisdom being handed on from generation to generation, and it was not necessary to give the detail of all the custodians that were responsible for this supreme knowledge. When Bhagavan says Aham, which means I, he is saying I taught this imperishable yoga. And so here the I means the Supreme Self, the Atma. So here the I represents the self of the enlightened being. Any spiritual knowledge can be imparted only to the extent one has unfolded the self. Only any master who has completely realized the self and knows the knowledge of the self can communicate to others about the self. We will continue with the second verse onwards tomorrow. So here ends the essence of the verse number 1. Chapter 4, Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, which is also referred to as Yoga of Knowledge, of Renunciation, of Action. This is the essence, the translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. Jai Gurudev, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu.